This is about shame-based, SBSS, shame-based self-statements. We tell the client in the very first session, your problem is not your homosexuality, your problem is your shame. If you can get your shame out of the way, you will move on to heterosexuality. And that's like revolutionary to the client. He doesn't understand that. But the enemy is shame. Shame is what stops the client from moving on. If you were here in the last presentation, Lester gave an example of a client who's doing very, very well, but then he's walking on the street, he sees a guy, he gets a sexual attraction, and he feels terrible about himself. He comes into group, and he's feeling deflated, defeated, discouraged because of what he saw. Well, it wasn't what he saw which is the reason for his discouragement, nor is it his arousal which should be the source of his discouragement. It's the interpretation he gave it. And if you follow that, it's like, oh, I'm a failure, I'm not getting any better, this therapy is not working, I'll always have these feelings, I'll always be gay. That's a shame-based self-statement. Now, in the course of working with the client, you encounter shame. And when you encounter shame, you have different strategies to get rid of it. And we're going to talk about that. Let me just lay this out for you. In the beginning, we have the assertion, and this is the self-state that we want our clients to live in. Assertion is I'm clear, I'm centered, I know who I am, I'm feeling great, I'm in charge of my life, I'm connected with myself, and I'm connected with others. If you will, double looping, left brain, right brain, in the core, there's no conflict, and he's connected to others. That's the assertion. And if he stays in the assertion, he cannot have a homosexual temptation. He may have a homosexual thought, he can think about it, he can kind of, get himself going if he really wants to. But homosexuality is a non-issue here. What gets him out of it is something called shame. And shame is the enemy here. Shame is somebody says something to me or does something to me that makes me feel depleted. There's a collapse. It's an embodied reaction. And we teach the client to pay attention to his body because his body is going to teach him when a shame moment happens. And if he experiences a shame moment, that takes him to the next, which is GZ, gray zone. Gray zone it's more like a mood state than it is a self state. And the reason why we say the gray zone is a mood state rather than a self state, because there is no self in the gray zone. He's lost himself. The gray zone is blah, dead, disconnected, discouraged, vaguely depressed, disconnected, helpless, hopeless. That's a mood state that a lot of our clients stay in. When I describe the gray zone to clients, they say, that's where I spent my childhood. That's where I live. Someone said, that's where my zip code is, the gray zone. It's true. And the gray zone leads to HE, homosexual enactment. And these are the self states that we're basically working with. Now, like all things diagrammatically like this, it's kind of simple because the arrows don't go back and forth, they go in one direction. So what we're saying is that the client cannot go from assertion to homosexual enactment. He has to be shamed first. Then he throws him in the gray zone, and then he wants to act out. And it's very interesting because you can have clients come to you, they've been struggling with this for years, and you say to them, have you ever noticed that there are days, maybe a few days or maybe a few weeks, where there's no particular homosexual attraction, and then there are other times where it seems to be a major preoccupation? And they'll say yes, and I'll say, do you know what the variable is? And they never understand what the variable is. And it's the self-state, because when they're here, it's not a problem. But when they're living here, they're always going back and forth to that. In addition, we have this other, which is G for grief. And those are the self-states. And the client learns to find out from moment to moment, what self-state am I in? Where am I at? And the way he's going to answer that question is by going to his body. His body will tell him. So the preceding scenario When the client says to me, I acted out last week, or I acted out last Saturday night, I will say to him, okay, you acted out last Saturday night. How were you feeling about yourself just before you acted out? And they always say the same thing, I don't remember. Because they were in the gray zone, they don't remember. That time-space trance state that we were talking about earlier. Gray zone. So you acted out Saturday night. How did you feel Saturday afternoon? Saturday afternoon, I felt pretty lousy. How did you feel Saturday morning? Pretty good. I felt really very good Saturday morning. I remember talking to my friends and blah, blah, blah. So I know he was in the assertion. So now we know that something happened between Saturday afternoon and Saturday morning. So what happened? And the client has no idea because it was subliminal. There was a shame moment that did not register. And we have it on video when they videotaping, when the client identifies the moment of shame. And he's going, and you see the aha moment. And he remembers, someone said something to me or did something to me that made me experience this drop. So reparative therapy is teaching the client to pay attention to these moments. Because if you can take care of these moments and bounce back to the assertion, you never have to worry about homosexuality. All you have to do is worry about shame. That's what I mean. Your enemy is not your homosexuality, your enemy is the shame. Because homosexuality is a reparation. It's a narcissistic illusion to deal with shame. Because remember, narcissism and shame are back and forth. The foundation of narcissism is shame. Narcissism is an infantile attempt to recoup the esteem lost from the shame moment. Narcissism is a false positive about the self. Shame is a false negative about the self. It's a negative introjection. Narcissism is a false positive to whatever extent that false positive exists. Okay? And there's an unconscious narcissism in homosexuality, which is contrary to nature, contrary to my body. I'm going to find happiness here. This is going to work for me. And no matter how many times I come away feeling disillusioned, dissatisfied, one more time, I'm going to find it. You know, culture is wrong, my religion is wrong. It's a narcissistic illusion. Let's look at what is shame. Shame is a split from self to other and self with self. Talk about the double bind. The double bind is the creation of shame moments. Double binds are interactions that create shame. And a double bind is as follows. Somebody does something to you that creates in you a negative feeling. And when you attempt to express that negative feeling, that negative reaction, the person responds with continued attack. And you try to express that, but you get further attack until you just drop. You're hopeless. You collapse. And it's an embodied collapse. And our clients were shamed in childhood. They reached out to the parent. They wanted to make the connection. The parent reacted in a certain way that was hurtful. They tried to express that hurt in the only two forms that people express hurt, anger or sadness. And that anger or sadness got punished. You're upsetting mommy, you're upsetting the family, you're upsetting the stability of the family. So the lesson was shut down, collapse, give up your power. Now it's very interesting. Freud wrote a paper in 1917 called Melancholia, Mourning and Melancholia, 1917. And he said, now we're getting now to the family background. Freud said, and he was not talking about parent-child, he said that when someone loves someone and that love is not reciprocated, the person blames themselves. He blames himself for not receiving the love from the other.